Your source for everything paranormal. Para X. The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Merry meet and blessed be, heed the words I call to thee. Honor the old ones in name and deed, hearken not to others' greed. Pray to the moon when she is round, luck with you shall then abound. Respect the earth, the sky, the sea, as you will it, so mote it be. Welcome to Stirring the Cauldron on the Para X Radio Network. And now, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
Hey, merry meet once again, and welcome to Stirring the Cauldron. Now, because my guest tonight, Barry Strohm, will be talking about his new book, Spirit Speak, Channeling the Life of Jesus, I thought it was a bit of music called for that I dug up called Lord of the Land, which was an appropriate bit if you look at it in a different way. I think it was Celtic by nature, but, you know, Lord of the Land is good. And now it's Lord of the Universe and even more. Now, Barry's an author of 6 books based on spirit communication. And as his abilities increased, he became able to receive messages from the holiest of spirits. In his early books, he tells about the realities of the afterlife and of communicating with historical figures like President Kennedy and George Patton and George Custer and even Butch Cassidy, to name a few. But this book incorporates channeled information from Jesus, his mother, and his disciples. So, hi, Barry and Connie. I know you're there too, so welcome both of you.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
We are definitely here.
Yeah, Connie can't hide. We know she's there.
Okay,
right.
I've been busted.
Yes, you have, but in a good way.
Thank you.
It's a witch bust, not a other itch bust, so you're okay.
Okay.
All right. Now, before we get started, I have to say that some people that are listening might find this book to be somewhat controversial, but just so you know, Barry is in no way, and Connie, in no way trying to convince people to forget about or alter their personal belief systems. This information that came through him through channeling is up to the individual to decide for themselves the validity of the messages. So all we ask is that you keep an open mind and don't shoot the messenger. All right. And I've dodged a few bullets myself here on the show, so don't shoot the host either. I'm not really good. I'm slowing down. I can't run quite as fast as I could. Now, this is your sixth book, and sixth book based on spirit communication. And I mentioned a minute ago that it all began by way of a channeling board. And now you're able to put aside the crutch and you can channel the words of spirit verbally. Was it difficult for you to take off those training wheels and trust yourself enough to speak the messages you received?
Absolutely. It was a slow process. As we were spelling out the words, I was realizing that I'm hearing the words in my head before they come out. So if you watch any of the videos of the last sessions we did using the board, you'll see I was only letting it touch one letter of the words, and then I was saying what the words were, and we were moving more rapidly and rapidly. And then our main guide, Laura, said, you don't need the board. You need to do this on your own. That's what you were sent back for. And I literally can sit and speak the words of the spirits now. But it took a lot of confidence building to reach this point.
Well, yeah, that's what I was getting to, because a lot of people they don't know how to trust themselves. It's not the words that they're getting, but it's not, we sometimes worry about misinterpreting or, not hearing it right or something. So the fact that I guess they kind of eased you into it kind of helped a little bit. And
it helped a lot. When I go back and look at the transcripts, I'm really surprised, because when I'm doing it, I don't really remember a lot about what it is. Right. I guess I'm in like this light trance when I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And when I go back and read the transcripts, I'm amazed, just how accurate the words seem to be. Every once in a while, I realize that I've got a couple bad words, but I'm probably close to 95% accurate with this stuff now. So it's really kind of amazing.
It is, and it's also a blessing, because for the last year or so, when I've watched your channel, the messages were coming in fast and furious, and I'm surprised that you and Connie don't have like carpal tunnel or bad shoulders or something from all that moving around, because you guys were whipping around like crazy.
We were both having shoulder problems, but they seem to have gone away since we've given up the board.
Yeah, I think that's part of the reasons they moved us along, to save our shoulders.
Oh, pity. Okay, pity works.
Yes.
You can take them, but yeah, no. So, I mean, it's good. And I think all people that do channeling of some sort or the other, we start out with crutches. I started out with the tarot deck, and very slowly I started realizing, similar to you, that I didn't need the deck, but it took me a real kick in the pants to let it go. I mean, sometimes I still kind of have it on the side, but, I trust the messages, but still, it's a difficult thing. It's not easy. So, bravo to you, because this isn't something that you've been doing all your life anyway,
Oh, no.
Not even close.
That's an understatement. I mean, it's the whole thing is still an utter shock to me that we're able to do this thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, as you said, it's what you were meant to be. It's your path. Go ahead.
It is indeed. It is indeed. No, but they've even had me do this in front of an audience now. We were doing a session, and then Laura said, it's time for you to do this. So they arranged for me to go over to this local bookstore, New Visions Books over in York, and they have a big Friday night forum where they have guest speakers come in. And I've been there before, but I'd never channeled. Mm-hmm. So We were there last month, and I channeled in front of the whole group, and we started off with Billy Graham coming through, and I spoke his words, and then we took questions, and we let him answer the questions. And then Jesus comes in at the end, and I just stood there and spoke his words for everybody. And I was actually amazed how well it all worked.
It has to sometimes come trial by fire. Mine was different, but I had vowed to Tim Shaw one time that I would never do readings on the air, period. I just wasn't about confidence. I just didn't want to do them. And he had a show that was full readings, and he had it with somebody else, and they were doing readings, and I was the guest, and I thought, okay, here I am. I'm just going to be a guest. And first person that called in and gave the questions, Tim said, okay, Marla, it's yours. And it's a good thing that I bit my tongue, because they would have bleeped me from here to kingdom come. But he said later on, you do it because you need to do it. And if somebody needs to put you in that uncomfortable place and make it happen, it's going to happen. So, yeah. So they did that to you, and see, you came out with bells ringing. That's good.
Well, at least I came out. I'm not sure about the bells.
Well, maybe some of these days you'll be hearing bells, because you're going to hear something that's like, whoa. And speaking of whoa, let's give a little history on how you're channeling Jesus and the other holy ones came to pass, because in your other Spirit Speak book, a wide variety of other people came through, historical figures, famous, all that. But my guess is that it came as a bit of a shock when he showed up at some point, right?
That's pretty accurate.
Mm-hmm.
It's from the beginning. When we were really learning board channeling, we used to work with another psychic, and she had a very strong Catholic background, and she was very good. And from the beginning, we would have, St. Augustine came through for us. So we had a lot of saints coming through, and I always assumed that it was for her, and that was what was going on. But once we really started doing this on our own, Augustine came in and said, yeah, I was sent back, and you're the reason we were working with you the whole time. So this has been a long process. We've been talking with the saints for quite a while. And then as we started getting a little more advanced, one evening we have the Blessed Mother come through for us. And it was the first time she comes through. Connie and I are both sitting there in tears. They're just running down her face as we're doing this message from her. And it's like, wow. And, even our cat was blown away. Leo was sitting on the counter in a box when she comes in. And I can see these two little eyes looking over the edge of his box watching us. And when she leaves, Leo stands up. And I said, okay, Leo, what would you like to say? What do you have to say after that? And his words were, I can't believe I just saw Mary. So, when even a cat verifies that, that you've got this one of the holiest of spirits come through, it was just unbelievable. And then she's telling things about what we're supposed to be doing. And then the first time Jesus comes through and you feel that energy, it's like, I cannot believe this is happening. You're thinking, well, maybe one of the spirits are pretending that he's Jesus. But, really when he comes through, I can actually see his form. And I'm thinking, this is really happening to us. It took a long, long time just to come to the understanding that we are actually living this miracle, and the holiest of the energies are coming through for us with these messages. And then they start to clarify that they have these messages that they want to give us and that they want us to write about. So we start, putting our transcripts up on the webpage, and because that was how we started to pass it on in the beginning. Mm-hmm. And then he starts to put together that he wants this book written about his life, because so much about his life has been altered and changed through the years that he wants the true story, the believable story of his life to come out. And he starts telling, and so we start going into different aspects of his life. And what he's telling us is, it just becomes so believable. I always had a hard time reading the Bible. I had a hard time understanding it. I could never get the parables. And I mean, some of the parables are so difficult that scholars don't even know what's going on with it. And it was just, once we started getting into this and and tying down some information about him, everything just kind of becomes this wonderful, believable story of this incarnate soul that was actually God that walks the earth. And I started outlining a book for him, and I started asking him specific questions about all different segments of his life. And he answered them. Sometimes he would have some of his holy saints come in and tell us. Augustine has always been a huge help to us with information. When I was writing the chapter about his birth, Mary comes in and does a session with us, telling what it was like when he was born, the truth of it, and it was incredible. I mean, and it's hard to believe. It's very hard to believe that these were actually people that lived this thing. Mm-hmm. So, like one of the stories that Mary was telling was how utterly shocked they were when these wise men show up. When you see the Christmas story, you have these 3 wise men come in, and they go to the manger with the baby Jesus in it. Well, actually, there were over 40 of them in the group of wise men, and they don't arrive until Jesus is like 3 months old. And it makes sense because they were very dangerous times. So these wise men, they traveled with their security, their entourage, and she tells the story of how blown away she and Joseph are when they all of a sudden they see this large group of royalty show up to see the Christ child.
A caravan of royalty.
Yeah, and then she goes on, and I said, well, did they really give you presents? And she says, yes, they gave us these presents. They gave us gold, frankincense, and myrrh, just like it is in the Gospels. But then they tell us that this is what they did, is they used these presents to finance their life in Egypt when they had to flee. So, I mean, this whole program is set up that God arranges that these wise men give them valuables. They take the valuables and actually live off of them, and that pays for how this poor family that had nothing can flee to Egypt to avoid King Herod. I mean, and when you tie all this stuff together, it just becomes so believable and understandable.
Yeah, I mean, pieces of puzzle do come together. Let me see something here. When questions come in from the chat room, I'm just going to throw them at you, and then I'll go back to the originally scheduled questions because I don't want to lose any. But got a question from Dave, and he said he was curious about the crown of thorns. You said that he didn't wear one, but every picture or statue you see of him, he's wearing it, and he's wondering why.
Because they wanted to exaggerate the suffering of Jesus so that people would better remember his death. So, I mean, you got to look at everything in context. Jesus is killed around 30 A.D. The first writings start to take place around 70 A.D. No one ever took notes of what Jesus spoke or what actually happens. At the crucifixion, the only people that were close to Jesus were the 2 Marys. Mary Magdalene and his mother both view the crucifixion. All of the disciples were in hiding because they feared for their lives. So actually the only true eyewitnesses you have of the crucifixion are the 2 Marys. And the stories that are written are what the women eventually tell the other disciples. So since none of them saw it, every story is based, every writing that comes afterwards is based on hearsay. Because there were no video cameras, there were no computers, there was no way they could take notes at the time. So just like all the stories start to become exaggerated. Like they tell us that when Christ is crucified, the dead don't rise from the grave. There weren't earthquakes and the sky doesn't turn black. and they tell us that he dies. Actually, he dies with dignity. And they also tell us that the Roman soldiers realized that he was somebody very special, because he was always presented as the Son of God. And he had created miracles, and these soldiers had seen him and they understood, but they're forced to follow their orders, and they're forced to crucify him. Mm-hmm. And Mary tells us that Jesus is actually treated with respect for him under the circumstances. They don't give him vinegar. They don't gamble over his clothes. And she tells us that when he finally dies, that many of the soldiers are actually in tears, and they take his body down off the cross immediately. In those days, the Romans would let the dead of the crucifixions rot on the crosses. Mm-hmm. So through the ages, the church expands on these stories and exaggerates them. So part of the concept of suffering was the fact that they put a crown of thorns upon his head. So that was just part of the story that's made up, just the same as the vinegar, as the gambling over his clothes, and as all the cruelty. And I mean, they tell us that Jesus was actually too weak to carry his own cross at that point, and that two men actually carry the cross for him. So the whole story is the story that winds up in the Gospels exaggerates the cruelty. His death was cruel enough as it was, mm-hmm. but it's exaggerated so that everybody remembers and keeps these terrible things in their mind. So it was a process, but it took hundreds of years for the story to become solidified as to how he dies. Mm-hmm.
And the crown of thorns is symbolic. Then, I mean, people see it and they're going to hurt just looking at it. So maybe that's right. Maybe that's it. It all became these symbols. Mm-hmm. But the story that they tell us, and I devote a whole chapter to his crucifixion, mm-hmm. is totally believable in the way that things actually come down and happen to him. Mm-hmm. And they also are very emphatic about the fact that Pilate attempts to save his life. Yes, I was going to bring that up. Yeah. The Pharisees are really the ones that are to blame for this. Mm-hmm. And Pilate tries to actually save his life. He has him flogged thinking it's going to satisfy the Pharisees, but it doesn't satisfy them. Yeah. So, I mean, I asked one time, I said, when we were just in the beginning getting this information, I said, what happened to the soul of Pontius Pilate? Was he sent to the lower level? The answer comes back, no, he tried to save my life. Mm-hmm. And then I actually tried to channel with Pilate, and they said, no, he's actually back right now. He's in another incarnate life, and he's not available to talk to. Mm-hmm. Then I asked what happened to the Pharisees, and he says they were sent to the lower level. And I said, have they been left out? And the answer was, no, they are still there. I asked, when will they get out? And they said, well, when God lets them out. So the true culprits are where they belong to be. Yeah. But he said none of the soldiers were punished for what they did. And he said that actually some of the soldiers reincarnated in later lives and served attempting to spread his words. Mm-hmm. So it's what I write. I mean,
I'm not in any way, manner, or form attacking the Bible. The Bible is absolutely the best guide we have to what happened to Jesus and to how you're supposed to live your life. What I am saying is that the truth is much more believable in many instances, and that because of the fact that the Bible was so changed and altered through the years, that it's time for the truth about the life of Jesus to be told. And, I asked Jesus, I said, why did you choose 2,000 years to return? Why did you pick that time? And his answer was that I had to return then to bring the word of the one God, because of all the paganism and all the multiple gods that people were using in that time under the Romans. Mm-hmm. So he comes back 2,000 years ago to bring that concept of the one God. Now he tells me that he wants the truth of his life to be known, because it's time for a more believable story, that when people read this book, they will find it much more believable than a lot of the things that they've read about him.
Right. Well, when and this came up in chat a while ago, but it came up before with me too. When you were still channeling through the board, and you spoke of channeling Jesus, someone asked me why in the world Jesus would come through a talking board. And my response at the time was, well, spirits, holy or otherwise, communicate with us in a manner that we recognize and are receptive to. So why wouldn't he? That was kind of, my quick answer. Do you have a further explanation?
No, the board was my crutch at the time.
At the time they were talking about the board, but I think now, too, they're wondering why there was a question in chat, why does he need a channel? So,
well, he can come through any way he wants to. This is just the process that he chose for us. I mean, we were taught to communicate with spirits in general using a channeling board. And I had to gain confidence in what I was doing, and his coming through on the board led to me being able to do it mentally. Now when he wants to come through, he's there. I mean, it's amazing how it works.
It's a process, yeah.
But it's a process.
But I mean, I guess that to answer that question of why he needs a channel,
this is our terminology. I'm referring to it as a channel.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just the way I refer to it. It's an energy path. It can be whatever you want to think of it as. It's just the way I think of it, and that was the route that was the easiest for me to develop my skills to reach the point we are now.
Mm-hmm. And Dave in chat, when that question came up, why does Jesus need a channeler? He wrote, he says, well, maybe for those who can't hear him. So that's a good answer.
That's exactly right.
Okay, good. So, all right, when most people think of Jesus, they think of him as a holy figure. But in addition to talking about his ministries, his teachings, and of course his crucifixion and resurrection, you talk in the book about things that we don't usually hear about, like his childhood or his role as a son, as a husband, and a father. There are chapters in the book dedicated to his life from birth to adulthood. My question is, how important is it, do you think, for us to understand Jesus as a human being first and foremost?
I think, there's a vast group of people out there that have their conceptions and are not going to change them under any circumstances.
Right, yeah.
But there are a lot of people that just don't know, that are on the edge, that they have trouble believing all of the parables and stories in the Gospels. Mm-hmm. There's people out there that I think will believe and understand a straightforward message that is basically understandable for everybody. You don't have to have a religious degree, to understand what I am writing in these books.
Right.
and you will understand the concept that God returns in an incarnate form, in the form of Jesus Christ. And he lives this normal life where he shares the sorrows, he shares the love of humans, he shares all of the things that you and I go through every day. And this gives him a total understanding of humanity. And through this, but when he begins his ministries, he speaks very, very simple words to the people. And he brings followers in. And this simple man creates a message that has expanded for 2,000 years. And that is a miracle of God that this could even take place.
Got a question from chat. She said, being brought up Catholic, we were taught Jesus was human and divine, and we were also taught Jesus, God, lives in us. So that being said, does that make us humans divine also?
There is a portion of the energy of God in all of us. That is correct. Now, about the divine part, that is up to your free will determines how you live your life. But there is a basic energy of God, and he is with all of you, just the same as he hears your prayers. And, I mean, he loves everyone just the same. I mean, he loves the sinners as he loves the saints. If you do evil, you are treated differently in his heaven, obviously. But he still loves you, and is willing to forgive. Many of the concepts are the same. But you have to keep in mind that the Roman Catholic Church determined the teachings of Christianity for well over 1,000 years. And the church determined what people would believe, and they would act. I mean, through the years, as church doctrine changed, teachings actually changed. Up until, I believe, the 12th century, priests were allowed to marry, for instance. Mm-hmm. The women started to become very powerful and were trying to influence the direction of the church. So all of a sudden, they decide that priests can no longer marry and chastity is required. But that was because of the women were gaining power, and the men wanted to suppress it. Mary Magdalene, she was never a prostitute. She was actually from a wealthy family. She had epilepsy, and Jesus cures her. But all of a sudden, and for hundreds of years, Mary is a saint in the eyes of the church. And all of a sudden, as this time comes that the women are gaining power, she becomes a prostitute. And when you go through all this, there's a lot of cause and effect relationships into how the different teachings were presented in the gospel and changed in the Gospels through the years. Just the same as there's 27 Gospels are presented in the Bible. There are well over 300 Gospels that are not included in the Bible. And in my book, I actually list these 300 Gospels that you can go in, and it shows the date, approximate dates of their drafting. So there is so much information that was never incorporated into the Bible. When Constantine starts to lay out the framework for the book, he's worried that the Christians are becoming so powerful that they may affect and overthrow his Roman rule. So he actually converts to Christianity himself, and they determine different arguments. They settle different arguments. When Constantine gets involved, it's 325 A.D. Now, that's over 300 years since Christ died. That's more years than the United States has been in existence. So you can imagine how these stories have been manipulated and changed through these 300 years.
Yeah.
And there's my book just simply presents a very common sense approach to the life of Jesus. And you can believe it's his words or you cannot believe. Now, what we do is something very different. We actually post our channeling sessions on my YouTube channel. And you can go in and listen to these sessions and decide for yourself whether we're speaking his words. You can watch me receive the message and hear what I say. The YouTube channel is in my name, Barry Strohm, and it's free, and you can go in and listen and make up your own mind whether we're in fact bringing you the proper message.
I'm going to have to bring in a proper message right now. We're going to take a break. We'll be back in about 2 minutes.
Stirring the Cauldron will be right back, so don't go away. If you end up with webbed feet, remember, you've been warned.
Hey, Johnny, who was that man I seen you talking to on the stoop a while ago? He looked kind of shady.
Hey, don't you be calling my friend shady. For your information, that was the hitman.
Hey, didn't your probation officer tell you to stay away from criminal-type poisons?
The hitman ain't no criminal-type poisons. He's a DJ.
Sure, Johnny. He's a DJ, all right. A DJ with an itchy trigger finger.
He ain't got no itchy fingers neither. He plays records, oldies. He's got his own show called The Time Tunnel on PhilliesFlashbacks.com.
Oh, I'm getting a Philly flashback, all right. Remember the night we drove into Philly in your new car and you wasn't paying no attention and drove right into the back of that paddy wagon, flung the lock, and out jumped Vinny the enforcer? Now that was a hitman. A real criminal-type poison.
Trixie?
What?
I'm down to my last knife and you're getting on it. Don't miss the Time Tunnel every Wednesday from noon till 3 p.m. Eastern at PhilliesFlashbacks.com.
From Haunted Road Media comes an exciting new novel by author Marla Brooks, Soul Connection, A Deadly Obsession. Two lost souls, ripped apart by murder in another century, find each other again in the present, only to discover that the murderer has followed them through time. Can their love save them, or will history repeat itself? Find out in this captivating new novel by Marla Brooks, Soul Connection, A Deadly Obsession. Available now on Amazon.com and at BarnesandNoble.com. Welcome back to Stirring the Cauldron. Once again, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
And we are back with Barry and Connie Strohm, and we're talking about the life of Jesus. And I've got so many questions that I know we're not even going to get to even, half of them, but I'm going to start throwing them out again because it's just cool. All right, now there's one chapter in the book defining who or what is God, the fact that there are many paths to the realms of heaven and that Christianity isn't the only path. And that last comment might come as a surprise to some people because I've had people point a finger at me and say that because I'm not Christian, I'm going to burn in hell. Now, in paganism, we embrace and we accept all religions, and people who we don't ask that they give up their religious beliefs to be a pagan, which is why I know Christian Druids and Jewish Wiccans and the whole thing. But during any of the channeling sessions, has he ever spoken about the disparity in the people's religious beliefs and how that wedge seems to almost be condemning mankind?
Yes, and that's actually part of why we're trying to, part of the presentation we're doing in this book. There are many, many paths to heaven, and you're going to go to heaven. It just matters how you're going to be judged and what realm you're going to wind up in. But keep in mind, only 1/4 of the world's population is Christian. Now, you're naive to think that 3/4 of the world's population isn't going to go to heaven. I mean, you're judged on many things. You're judged. Back up a second. Jesus, when he walked the earth, spoke of love for one another. He spoke against hatred. He told hatred was a sin. And he spoke a very, very simple message. Now stop and think. Jesus spoke to the poor and the uneducated. If he would have spoken in the parables that we see in the Gospels, they'd have thrown stones at him and he'd been forgotten. So he preaches a very, very simple message of love and to drive hatred from your heart. So, no matter what your religion, if you're following a message of love and living a good life and doing well towards others and not being cruel or evil, you will be judged well when you go into his heaven and return home. So there are many, many paths, and and believe me, Christianity is not the only path to heaven.
Well, I agree with that. And, it was interesting to me talking about the disparity of different cultures and everything. I mean, all right, Jesus was born a Galilean Jew. He grew up in the Jewish faith, and it wasn't until he was about 30 years old that he was baptized by John the Baptist and began his own ministry. And even then, according to some accounts, he was often referred to as rabbi. And it said that he debated with fellow Jews on how to best follow God. So it would seem as though he wasn't necessarily condemning Judaism because he went a different path. I think he was just maybe trying to incorporate other aspects. And while I certainly can't speak on his behalf, I'm not sure that Jesus himself would condemn people for not following Christianity in this day and age, would he?
He does not.
No, he doesn't. But once again, the statement that you just made, you are falling into the trap of believing the words that are written.
Well, that's all we have to go on until your book, I guess.
Well, yeah, I have a little more than that. But, he speaks that he has always was raised with love of the one God. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't really talk about the fact that he was raised in the Jewish faith. He says that the angels came to Mary and Joseph and spoke to them of the one God, and that he was raised in the belief that that there is only one God to be worshipped, and he was very loose in how that took place. Many of the things that are written are not true. For instance, I asked him about the prodigal son, the story of the prodigal son. I said, "Did you actually speak of that?" He said, "No. You are judged for how you live your entire life. You cannot live a life of evil and at the end be forgiven." So, I mean, it's there's the story that the teachings that he actually spoke are incredibly simple and easy to believe.
Were they ever written down anywhere? Sorry, Connie, go ahead.
No, they weren't written down, and that's the point. They were written from memory as an afterthought. Mm-hmm. There were a couple of the disciples had the ability to write, but most of the disciples were common laborers or fishermen. They didn't know how to read and write. Mm-hmm. All they knew how to do was remember the stories and speak of it. Matthew could write. Paul, coming in later, could write and did a lot of writing. But Paul never knew Jesus as a human. He only met him after the resurrection. So you've got to think of all these details and all of the problems that there are with the writings that we have.
Yeah, well, that's true. But, when you were talking about one God, I was brought up to kind of believe that there was only one supreme being, but he's called by many names, he could be Buddha, he could be Allah, he could be whoever, but I really believe there's only one supreme being, which is why it's kind of like people always have to claim one. Well, that's mine. It's not yours. Mine's better than yours. And they go to that, but I could be wrong, but maybe I'm hoping there is only one, and he's, forgiving enough to look down and say, "Oh God, stupid humans.
Yeah, and boy, he's really doing, believe me, he's really
Absolutely.
doing that now. Look, God, I refer to him as God. It is this universal energy. Now, I don't really care how you refer to him, as long as you refer to his teachings of love and of being kind to one another. But I mean, you can refer to him by any other. I refer to him as God. That's how. When Jesus speaks through me, he refers to him as God and the teachings of God. So that's why I do it. But there are many people. There are many cultures in this world that have never heard of God, and they will still go to. They will find their place in heaven when their soul passes from their incarnate life.
I mean, I don't know about atheists and agnostics. Well, atheists, yeah, but I just don't understand how people can't think that there isn't somebody to pray to up there. I mean, you don't have to get that entity a name, but I can't believe what kind of a life would it be if we didn't have somebody like that to look up to. Even if it's, a flying angel or something, just.
Well, I've seen angels, and all of the things that I have gone through, and I have now seen the things that they have told me that have come true, the things that have happened. I mean, I can assure you that there is this ultimate power up there that has control of things. Now, whether you want to call him God or Buddha or whatever you want to refer to him, but there is this ultimate energy, and I mean, I am 1,000% convinced of it.
Yeah, that's why I kind of refer to it as a supreme being, and give it any name you want. They don't care, but that belief thing.
You are correct.
I try to be sometimes.
Now, Jesus taught a very simple thing, and other religions, like the Buddhists or the Hindus, they live by the same rule. It's love each other, help each other, and have the love of God in your heart. And they might be thinking they have the love of Buddha in their heart, but I feel like you do. He is the supreme being with different names depending on which religion. So that's the important part.
It is. Now, one of the basic concepts in this and previous other books is the concept of reincarnation. And we were talking a little bit about the way Jesus gets his message across, or God gets his message across. And in the book, you talk about a soul family of God that returns to try to spread his words. So do you know who the core group was initially, and are any of the current ones known to us?
Well, there are. We're going to get into another very difficult subject here.
Of course, that's why I'm here.
To understand this. Mankind has walked the earth probably for 250,000 years. Your soul energy was created at the time of creation. So your soul energy has been around for maybe billions of years. So where do you think your soul energy was before humans walked the earth? Well, and I write extensively. I wrote about this in my Spirit Speak the Universe book extensively. Our God is God of our galaxy. And in our galaxy, there are planets that actually follow his commands that are advanced cultures. And this ties into all the extraterrestrial stories and everything that I've written in the past. But your soul, that all of our souls have been present on other planets. Now we're told that God led incarnate lives on all of the civilized planets, which have been around much longer than our planet has. So when he does this, certain souls have literally served him for billions of years. And these are souls that have advanced and that through these years of serving God, have earned their place on the seventh realm of heaven. And these are the souls that he selects to send back to serve him in different capacities. For instance, one of the souls that he sent back in a special capacity was Billy Graham. Another soul was Mother Teresa. And an example of reincarnation that's noted in the Bible is Elijah, the prophet, that reincarnates as John the Baptist. So there is actually biblical reference to reincarnation. Jesus spoke to his disciples of reincarnation. He never spoke to the common person because he felt it was too complicated. But he did speak to his disciples, and in some of the Gospels, it is actually written. Reincarnation is mentioned in the lowest Gospel of Mary, in the Gospel of Thomas. So it's a concept that was out there, but the church takes control of the teachings after 300 AD, and the church decides that it is better for the power of man if they teach the fact that the soul gets one shot at it and you go to heaven or hell. Because now, they didn't want the people thinking that they get more than one chance, so to speak, through reincarnation.
Scare them into getting it right the first time.
So they tell them it's their only shot, and they scare the people, and they teach fear.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there is no hell over there. The fire and brimstone doesn't exist. There is a lower level of nothingness where evil souls are sent. But Jesus physically never spoke of hell. What he spoke of, what he told the people was, if you lead a good life and follow my words, you will join me in heaven. That is how simple his message was. Mm-hmm. And the church takes a simple message and decides that that people have to live in fear of not going to heaven, and the only way that the door can be opened is through an organized religion, and they come up with things like you have to contribute 10% of your income. Well, Jesus never spoke of tithing. He spoke of helping the poor as best you could. Mm-hmm. But you'll never see that 10% thing anywhere in his teachings. And there's all these things come into being through these thousands of years that your church controls the doctrine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it gets sticky.
Mm-hmm.
I've got one more question that I can squeeze in, and it's going to kind of lead into us kind of winding down here. Patty wants to know, how many books about Jesus are you going to write?
What I'm going to write, at least 3 books about Jesus. The first one is channeling his life. The second book, volume 2, I actually have finished, and that channels his messages and the messages of his disciples. In that book, we devote a large chapter to message that he's given us through channeling, and each chapter in the book is dedicated to sessions that we do with his disciples. St. Peter has a chapter, St. Timothy, Augustine, Paul, and then we go into his modern soul family, and we have a chapter by Mother Teresa that we channel with, and we have a chapter where we channel with Billy Graham. And that will be very simply, the name of that's going to be Channeling the Messages of Jesus and the Holy Spirits. The third book, which I'm about a third of the way through, is going to be channeling the teachings of Jesus. Each chapter in that book will be dedicated to what he has told us about different categories. For instance, his feelings, and he has incredibly strong feelings about abortion. it talks about that. We talk about reincarnation. We talk about his soul family. We talk about his teachings towards, how our government should perform. He's very emphatic that he helped the founding fathers create this country, and that he defined how our country was to be run. And because of how our country is the closest to the teachings of God. And and he's very emphatic about, as long as we maintain those basic principles that he taught the founding fathers, our country will continue to prosper. If we draw away from those principles, we will lose his blessing, and our country will be like every other country, like the Roman Empire, that will disintegrate. So we cover a lot of information in those 3 books, and it will probably take about 3 years to put it all together.
I think people can wait. It's good because we got the first one started now. So I just want to say that there is chapters about his marriage, his childhood, chapters to telling the truth about the death and the resurrection, and Last Supper. All kinds of stuff. So we didn't get to, like I said, I didn't think we were going to get to much of it, and we didn't. But perhaps we'll have to save that for another time. But in the meantime.
Yeah, there's some really great stuff in there real quick. Like, I even asked him to repeat the blessing that he gave at the Last Supper. I mean, it's things like that.
Yeah.
It's just incredible stuff to read.
Okay, so give everybody your website or where they can find you and the YouTube channel real quick.
Okay, YouTube channel is my name, Barry Strohm, real simple. My website is wordsofgodthenandnow.com. I have a Facebook group by the same name, Words of God Then and Now, and between those places, that you can trace me down. The only place you can get a personalized copy of any of my books is off of my websites. So that's pretty much the short story of it.
Good, and you got to remind me when you come on that we kind of sometimes do need 2 hours. I forgot. All right.
Yeah, we didn't get very far today, did we?
No, we didn't. But thank you both, Connie, Barry, for coming in, and I'm sure we'll see you back sooner than later for more cauldron stirring and channeling sessions and book stuff and whatever. And we'll just go as the people want, whatever they get. Whatever they ask for, we'll give them. Right. Okay, and also, as I want to thank everybody for listening in, as usual. And until next time, everyone, blessed be, and merry meet again. Good night.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks. Please join us again next week at the same time for another great guest and more cauldron stirring. Any rebroadcast or other use of this program without explicit permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2019. The Mysterioso March by Kevin MacLeod is licensed through Incompetech.com.